It was an ordinary morning at Los Angeles International Airport, the bustling hub filled with the familiar symphony of announcements, hurried footsteps, and distant conversations. Among the chaos, a particular first-class flight was boarding for New York. This flight, like many others, was filled with travelers ranging from business executives to celebrities trying to maintain a low profile. As the first-class passengers began to settle into their plush leather seats, a middle-aged man named Todd strutted down the aisle. Dressed in designer athleisure, sporting oversized sunglasses, and carrying a limited-edition duffel bag, Todd was the epitome of someone who desperately wanted to be noticed. He was loud, brash, and seemed to revel in his self-proclaimed importance. Todd's seat was beside an older man, a quiet figure who sat calmly by the window. The older man wore a simple, well-worn leather jacket over a plain shirt and jeans. A gray cowboy hat rested on his lap, partially obscuring his weathered face. He was the kind of man who carried himself with quiet confidence, the type that needed no validation from anyone. Todd, however, was quick to judge. Sliding into his seat, he glanced at the older man and smirked. "Looks like they let anyone in first class these days," he muttered, loud enough for the passengers nearby to hear. The older man gave him a polite nod but said nothing. Todd wasn't done. "Seriously, though. Did you win the lottery or something? First class isn't cheap, you know." The older man remained silent, his eyes focused on the view outside the window. Annoyed by the lack of reaction, Todd leaned in closer. "Hey, I'm talking to you. Don't tell me you're one of those people who got upgraded because the airline felt bad for you." At this, the flight attendant approached, her expression a mix of professionalism and discomfort. "Sir, is there a problem?" she asked, glancing between Todd and the older man. Todd waved her off. "No problem. Just wondering how this guy got here. No offense, buddy, but you don't exactly scream first class." The flight attendant opened her mouth to respond, but the older man raised a hand, signaling it was fine. "No offense taken," he said with a small smile, his voice deep and calm. Satisfied that he had asserted his dominance, Todd leaned back in his seat, chuckling to himself. "Unbelievable," he muttered under his breath. The flight took off, and for a while, Todd kept himself entertained by scrolling through his phone, ordering drinks, and making sure everyone around him could hear about his latest business ventures. Meanwhile, the older man remained quiet, occasionally flipping through a magazine or staring out the window. It wasn't until halfway through the flight that things took an unexpected turn. A young man from the economy section came forward, clutching a napkin and looking nervous. He stopped in front of the older man and hesitated before speaking. "Excuse me, sir," he said, his voice trembling slightly. I am a huge fan. Would you mind signing this for me?" Todd's ears perked up. He looked between the young man and his seatmate, confused. "Wait, what's going on here?" The older man took the napkin with a kind smile. "Of course," he said, pulling out a pen and signing it with a flourish. The young man beamed. "Thank you so much, Mr. Eastwood. You have no idea what this means to me." Todd froze. His jaw dropped as the words sank in. "Eastwood?" The young man turned to leave, but Todd grabbed his arm. "Wait a second," he said, his voice frantic. "Did you just say Eastwood? As in Clint Eastwood?" The young man nodded, looking at Todd as if he'd just asked if water was wet. "Yeah. Clint Eastwood. The legend." Todd's face turned ashen. He slowly turned to the man sitting beside him, who was now watching him with an amused glint in his eyes. "No way," Todd stammered. You're Clint Eastwood?" The older man chuckled softly and extended a hand. "Guilty as charged," he said. "Nice to meet you." Todd's mind raced. He felt the blood drain from his face as he replayed every word he'd said to the Hollywood icon. The insults, the mockery, the sheer arrogance, it all came crashing down like a house of cards. I didn't recognize you," Todd stuttered. "I mean, I'm a huge fan. Really, I am. I've seen all your movies. Gran Torino, Dirty Harry, you're a legend." Clint smiled politely but didn't respond. Desperate to redeem himself, Todd continued to babble. "You're incredible. I mean, what are the chances? Me sitting next to Clint Eastwood. Can I get a picture?" Clint raised an eyebrow. "A picture?" Todd nodded eagerly. "Yeah. Just, for the memories." Clint leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. "Son," he said after a moment, "I've been in this business a long time. Met all kinds of people. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that how you treat someone when you think they're a nobody says a lot about who you really are." The words hit Todd like a freight train. He opened his mouth to respond but found himself at a loss for words. Clint gave him a small nod and turned back to his magazine, effectively ending the conversation. For the rest of the flight, Todd sat in silence, his bravado replaced by an overwhelming sense of regret. He'd come onto that plane thinking he was the king of the world, only to be humbled by a man who didn't need to say much to command respect. When the plane landed, Clint Eastwood walked off without a word, his cowboy hat tilted just so. Todd watched him go, wishing he could take back every word he'd said. As he sat there, Todd realized something important. Respect isn't about who you think someone is, it's about who you are, no matter who you're speaking to. And for the first time in a long time, Todd felt like the smallest man in the room.